Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Heather Gudenkauf. Heather is the New York Times bestselling author of 10 novels, including the Edgar-nominated The Weight of Silence and The Overnight Guest, which was an Amazon Best Book of the Year and described by Kirkus Reviews as masterful, terrible, and absolutely addicting, tense, taut, and terrifying. Her new thriller, Everyone is Watching, was named to Goodreads' list of readers' most anticipated mysteries and thrillers of 2024. Heather lives in Iowa with her family and a very spoiled German short-haired pointer named Lolo. She enjoys spending time with her family, reading, swimming, and hiking. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's so fun. And Heather and I got to be a guest on Killer Author Club last week when we interviewed Mary Kubica. So if you missed that, go check it out over on Killer Author Club, because Heather, along with Kimberly Bell and Kara Ruda, do such a fun show. And they do it live, which, as I was telling Heather, I finished the episode like sweating and panting and needing a cocktail just to calm my nerves. So
it was so much fun. Thank you for joining us.
But I was so nervous. I'm clearly not meant to go live ever. So Heather, I devoured this book. I was a little behind my reading because I moved my daughter to Denver, and I devoured it like in one evening, stayed up until 1 a.m., which I think I'm still sort of paying the price of 2 nights ago. So tell our listeners about Everyone is Watching.
Yeah, sure. So Everyone is Watching is the story of 5 strangers who from all across the United States, all walks of life, who are invited to take part in a competition reality series. So they all leave their homes, their families, pack up and move to a isolated estate in Northern California and prepare to get ready for this game. But when they get there, they very quickly realize that they've been brought there for something very different. It's not what they expected, and long held secrets that they would prefer stay buried start to come out.
Yes, and it is from the get-go. So I want to talk about the character of Fern. So Fern is the assistant to the sort of the head of this Cat, who is the head of this show, and a difficult woman. Cat is difficult, and Fern is she's been doing this job for a long time. She's she lacks some confidence. And where did Fern come from? So where do your characters come from? And maybe I should just back up and say sort of who emerged first, because there's all of these characters are very distinct, with very sort of deep dark secrets and ulterior motives. But I'm curious to know who developed first, and tell us where Fern came from, because she's such a spitfire. I loved her.
Yeah, well, I love Fern too. Fern wasn't the first character that emerged, but I knew that that she was going to be a big part of the story, and in fact, she did emerge to be really one of the leads in the story. Just primarily revolves around her and her relationship with her boss, who is very difficult, and a past that she has that hasn't always been easy as well. And she's kind of thrust into this role, a different role for this reality show that she's not expecting either. And she gets a lot of surprises along the way as well. The first character who came to me, though, was Mare, who is the Iowa mom who has a very fragile child who's ill, and she's broke. She's on her own, and she needs money to help care for her child, to get her the medical care she needs, and she's desperate. And so she's like, I'm going to do this. I can take a couple weeks, and I'm going to go win this money and then go back to my family. But when she gets there, it's not what she signed up for.
No, it's not what I mean. It's $10 million, right? So this is not just like this is not like the $1 million winner. This is a huge, huge amount of money. But boy, like from the get-go, I mean, everyone's like, well, what about the dangers of this or the dangers of that? You signed you signed the liability waiver. So they are from, and it really does. I can see how Mare emerged first because her story is so compelling with, her daughter has cystic fibrosis. The dad of the father of the children is, not around and not helpful. And yeah, and you can imagine, I think it's such a universal pull for parents, and really for anybody to know that like, how her kids are depending on her and what a spot she's in. So, and the fun thing about this, and I'm not giving anything away, is that these people soon realize that they know each other, and some of them know each other from past experiences in their lives. So so how do you do this because everybody has a secret, everybody is hiding something. Do you braid this all out? This is what I always am so impressed by, when people have sort of literally there's a dozen secrets in here. There's there's 6 characters if you count Fern, right? There's 5. Everybody's got at least one secret, sometimes 2. And how are you plotting this whole thing out? How are you doing this, Heather?
No, I am a firm, or have been a firm, pantser, where I have an idea, and I run with it. And that was nearly impossible to do with this book because there are so many layers to it. And so I ran into so many brick walls, and it took me a really long time to write. Probably took the longest of any book I've written. And so I think I wrote and rewrote it 3 times. Characters came and went. The plot changed, the ending changed completely. Some characters who were in the forefront in the beginning, in the first drafts, fell to the back. And it was an adventure. And, there was a lot of frustration, a lot of, can I finish this? Can I get it done? But in the end, I'm really, really happy. It's a fun book. It's a little different than what I've written before, but it is really fun. It was fun to write, and it's fun to see it finally go out there into the world.
Yes, I'll bet. Yeah. I'll bet. Well, so I like the way you say I have been a firm pantser, as though perhaps now we're taking this down. Is there a way to change? I'm curious to know, because I'm also a firm pantser, and I'd love to hear that someday we could probably like plot a book out, outline a book.
Well, I tell you, I don't know. I'm in the midst of it. I am working on my next one, and I was like, I'm going to plot this thing out from beginning to end, because as pantsers, I think there's a magic to it for us as well. Like, things come, they emerge, and we surprise ourselves. But there's also a lot of unknowns and back roads that take us to where we want to go. And it's not always the most efficient way to write.
No.
And so I thought, I'm going to plot this next one out. And so I spent a couple months just plotting. And so really thinking it through, and gosh darn it, if the characters just don't do what they want anyway.
Yeah.
So
right.
I think I'm not a completely reformed pantser, but I think I'm for this book coming up, it's a combination of the two, which is helping me in many ways, for me to stay focused and on this roadmap to where I want to go. But I think this probably happens for plotters too, that things surprise you, and you have to listen to those characters in your head because they want to do what they want to do.
I do think, like, to your point, and I don't know because I've never been a plotter or an outliner, and I'm not suggesting that those books aren't, fabulously creative. But for me, I do find if I start to plan something, it really feels planned. Versus, I feel like if I let it happen organically. Now, but as you said, the road to an organic 90,000 words is usually like 160,000 words, because I go all the way down a road and realize that isn't going to work, so you sort of,
Hmm.
so you're right. In terms of efficiency, I think, yeah, it is not efficient. So tell us about the process for this book, because,
Hmm.
obviously you've had huge success, lots of incredible books, lots of accolades. You had a gap. Was
Hmm.
it because of the book? Was it the world, the pandemic? I think it's important for people to know that this
Hmm.
job, we're here to celebrate the book and everything looks so hunky dory. But as you said, there's a process that's really hard. So
Right.
will you share a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure, sure. So it was written partially during the pandemic. My previous book, The Overnight Guest, was also a pandemic book, as was the one before, and so schedules, timelines, all were kind of refigured in the publishing world because there were so many. There were shipping issues, there were production. I mean, just it affected everything, and
Yeah.
so that was part of it. Part of it was for me, just the writing of the story, since it was different for me. Um, that took me quite a bit longer to cut and for it all to come together. And then there's also the some personal piece. My dad was diagnosed with cancer during the writing of the
Yeah.
book and entered into hospice care. And of course, you want to be there for your family, and that took precedence. And so the
Yeah.
writing just kind of was set aside. Um, and I was able to spend a lot of really quality time with my family, which is to me the most important.
Of
But
course.
it lots of uh roadblocks in and out with writing the story, but eventually finally it comes together. And I think as writers we're always wondering, do I have another book in me? Can I do this? No matter how
Yeah.
many times you do it, no matter the reviews or how well it does, you I know for me, I'm always thinking, am, did I just use up all my creative energy?
Right.
Is it
Was
gone?
that
And
it?
so
Right.
there's a lot of unknowns with publishing and
Right.
reliance on other people's, everything, the market, schedules,
Yeah.
pandemics, everything.
Yeah. And it is interesting. I mean, I experienced this last year when I had I'm not going to have a book out this year because last year
Mhm,
was also really a hard year. But it is interesting because
mhm,
I think it's, you know, of course, as writers, we also know you have to show up even on the hard days, right? You have to show up at the computer, but there are things that happen in life that just derail. And
mhm,
it's not the same as if I don't think it's the same because I spent 10 years in finance too. And I don't think it's the same as that kind of job where you can really show up and sort of work through, whatever else is going on in your life, at least for periods. I think there is something to writing where if you're going through something really emotional, like, a sick
mhm,
um, parent or family member, that it really does just like it sort of takes all that energy out
mhm.
of and doesn't it makes it impossible. I found that
Right.
really, and here I was like, I wrote books with newborn babies and pregnant and,
Mhm.
sick or whatever, but I mean, not sick, but like,
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
my own version of a man cold. And I just could not, I could not do it. So I think it's really
Yeah.
interesting that makes it even tougher, right? Because it takes some
Mhm.
emotional piece of us.
It does. And you're sitting with yourself and your laptop, and it's just you and what's in front of you, and it can be really hard to uh, put that emotional block where you're blocking the whole world out, when writing really is a very emotional, writing fiction and writing in general is a very emotional artistic endeavor. And I think that this always needs to be on the surface in our work, but it's so hard to tell other people's story when you're trying to figure out your own.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
it can be challenging. So yeah, we have to sit down. I mean, that's a given. We do have to sit down. We have to, schedule that time. But sometimes the world throws us curveballs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I do think, I mean, I think I've had moments where I tried to force it, but I just think there's some little particle of magic that has to be sort of available
Mhm.
for inside you to make it work. So
Right.
so tell us about first of all, I was telling you before we got on the air that I could
Mhm.
absolutely see this as a movie, which is so
Oh, thank
fun.
you. Mm.
So I mean, and some of those obstacles, I'm not going to get into it because you're going to want to read the book, but I was like, oh my god, these this is like, it's got some survivor elements that I thought
Mhm.
were super intense. So tell us about the process of what did you how do you do your writing in it when life is sort of normal.
Mhm.
What's your sort of, I know because you're also really active with the Killer Author Club and a million other things. So how do you sort of portion your days? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Anyway, how do you
Yeah.
sort of set yourself up?
Yeah, and I think for me, it varies for what part of the book I'm in, what what part I'm working on. So like the brainstorming session or like with the book I'm working on, the plotting, that looks very different than when I'm working actually composing the book. So I often start with a notebook and I just brainstorm lots of ideas. I really think there's something to be said about that physical hand pen to paper for me anyway. And so I start there, and then when I'm ready to start writing, I don't like sitting behind my desk here. I like to take my laptop and go somewhere else, whether it be like a comfy couch or even outside if I'm in Iowa, so the weather is never predictable, but I like to get away from my desk because I feel like lots of times here I'm answering emails, I'm
Right.
it's a lot of busy, important but busy stuff. And so I like to kind of remove myself from my desk. And, that can take, well, for me now, like with this book, it's taking a long time to write. But so my writing there looks very different than when I'm doing my research too, which I do as I write. I don't research ahead of time. I just research as I go for the most part and write little notes to myself, and say, well, ask about this, and
Yes.
which can get you into trouble too when you have to go back and fix things. But uh, that's how I do that. And then periodically, as I'm writing, like every 50 to 100 pages, I'll print it off, get away from the desk again, and go through very carefully to make sure I'm on the right track
Right.
and things are falling into place. So every iteration of the book or every phase is completely different and feels very different to me.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
the
no, I
amount of
can
time I spend
imagine.
and is very different because I don't know about you, but in the actual writing part of the day, composing, I only have so much bandwidth for that.
Yeah.
And it might be 1,000 words, it might be 2,000 words, but I'm tired after that. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's exhausting. It's totally exhausting.
Yeah.
And especially when I think you're dealing with really like emotional things. So these are thrillers, they're
Hmm.
obviously they're absolutely page turners, but there are some heavy, themes in this book, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of
Right.
there is, themes of well, obviously there's secrets everywhere, but there's themes
Hmm.
about, sort of things that have happened to women. Um,
Hmm.
a fair number of those. And I find, of course, this is Killer Women, so we always talk about, women issues and women things. And I do find
Hmm.
it really, I really find it, you know, a universal thing to hear about women's experiences in uncomfortable situations, which I think we can
Hmm.
agree that all of these women, are in uncomfortable situations, and each of them is sort of not as powerful as, their counterparts, whether it's the, Fern and her boss, or the men versus the women. And I sort of think, do you set out to sort of tackle those issues? I mean, it's not, none of it is like, you read those books where you're like, okay, they're trying to make a point about something
Hmm.
here, and this is not that at all, which I think you do beautifully in all your books, which
Thank
is to
you.
weave in, real things that happen to people, real tragedies, real struggles. But I wonder about sort of like, so when for instance, when Mare developed first, you know, are those issues, like, she's a single mom, right?
Hmm.
She's the person in charge. Are these things that sort of just come naturally from being a mom and a woman, or are you sort of like thinking like, how does that happen for you? I guess is
Yeah.
what I'm.
Well, I think, I tend to write about women characters who are put in extreme situations. And a lot of, I think we experience and, feel a lot of the same emotions. Maybe we're not in the same situation as Fern, or as Wilford and Mare. Like, Mare's child has a life-threatening illness. Many years ago, my son had a life-threatening illness, and I was fortunate, that my family unit is together through all that. But you'll do anything to protect your kids, anything, and that makes you think about that. And um, fortunately, my son is doing great now. But I think I do. I don't think I always start out intentionally infusing teeny little bits, and it's teeny because I live a very boring life, nothing like the characters in my books. But
thank God.
I like to, yeah, thank God. I do infuse little teeny bits of my life into my books as well. And I don't know if it's kind of an exploration and of life in general, but it's what we see too. What we write is a reflection of what we see in the world. And so I think I hope I highlight some of those issues organically through the book, but also the perseverance. And we don't always like the characters, and at least in this book, they're not always likable. But in some ways they're relatable, I'd like to think. And we find we're rooting for them. And that's life. We're not all good. We're not all bad. We make mistakes. We have, people have secrets. But to see the characters in this book kind of struggle with the mistakes they've made and the decisions they've made, and they're put in a situation that is literally life and death to get to the other side. So
well, and I love what you said. I mean, they're even the most sort of despicable characters in the book have moments where you sort of feel and they feel real. They don't, like you said, I think that is actually, I don't think there cannot be a character in a book who feels genuinely real, who doesn't have unlikable moments, because even the best of us, right, are at times pushed into a corner. Very, we will lash out. We are unlikable because, we're protecting something that feels, like you said, very important to us. And each of these characters. And I love that too, because I think the nuance of character is what makes them feel real to me, right? The sort of the moments when you're like, that was very ugly, and it also totally resonated with me, because of course, who hasn't been the ugly parent or the ugly, I mean, we just, if it's pushed too hard, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I love what Fern does, and I'm not going to tell anybody what Fern does, but right at the get-go, Fern is pushed too hard, and she does a very unexpected thing. And it's what I love about it too is, Heather, even just knowing her for just a few pages, when she does that thing, we absolutely know that is not really, and that is not in her character, and it becomes this such a fun thing to watch from a character we hardly know. So you do that's such a beautiful thing, that you can know somebody well enough in just those first pages to be like, oh my God, what are you doing, girl? So anyways, and I mean, I really mean it. It had so many twists and turns. It's so unexpected. And I think, like you said, I can imagine how the end totally changed. I can imagine how things rearranged themselves as you wrote. Now, what's the process with your editor? Because I also feel like sometimes we can't see the way something could end up and be, different until we're sort of way away from it. So is that helpful? Do you have somebody who works with you?
Oh, yes. So I have some early readers who are always very helpful. I have friends, family members who read the early things, and then my agent. And if I have a really close relationship with my editor, in the sense that we really talk a lot. It's really a collaboration, because me being a pantser, I get in the weeds sometimes. And my editor is so good about, like you said, looking over everything and seeing the big picture, the things that I don't quite see, and the nuances of the characters, and some of the action as well, what what maybe needs to be looked at, expounded upon. But it's a great collaboration. It's never forced. It's never like you must
Yeah.
do this. It's all what about and have you thought about? And I think that is something I really need and appreciate in an editor. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that is, and it's something that unpublished authors, really need to try to find in some, whether from a critique partner or an edit, a developmental editor, because I think it is a sort of priceless. It's invaluable to getting the book to where you need to be. So, and the fact that you have it with your editor is like, obviously what a gift
Very
that is.
fortunate. Yeah,
Very.
It is.
So fortunate. So all I can say, everyone, Heather, tell us where to find you online, and give us a short little bit about Killer Author Club too, so we can make sure everybody knows.
Yeah, so Killer Author Club is a collaboration that I do with authors Kimberly Bell and Kara Ruda. We're all thriller writers, and our a few years ago, our books were coming out in the middle of the pandemic and everything had shut down. And we thought, let's do something fun with the three of us. And then we had so much fun. We thought, let's invite other thriller authors that we love and want to know more about, love their books. And it's 30 minutes of fast-paced fun. We talk all things killing of the fictional variety. We have a cocktail, lots of giveaways. So you can find us at killerauthorclub.com and on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And people can find me at heathergudenkauf.com on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.
That's what, and yeah. So I know, right? I'm with you on that, sort of, with the TikTok. That feels a little bit beyond I'm too old for that, I think, maybe. But but once you've read everyone is watching, go back and look at Heather's other books if you haven't, because really, Heather, you have such an incredible backlist, and I hope they make Everyone is Watching into a movie. I would love to see who plays all these fun characters. Yes, it'd be so fun. Of course, that's what we all dream of. Everybody, this was Heather Gudenkauf with Everyone is Watching. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.